I was stirring a pot of soup when something hot and sharp struck the side of my head, the ladle clattered to the floor, and before I could even react, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice cutting through the air. "Who cooks like this, you useless woman?" Crystal's words burned worse than the metal. For a second, the world tilted, my hand went to my temple, and I felt the sting of boiling broth sliding down my face. In the living room, my son Andrew didn't move, he didn't come running, he just reached for the remote and turned up the television volume. I stood there shaking, staring at the flickering screen that drowned out my pain. 5 minutes later, my body gave in, the crash of metal pots echoed through the kitchen as I fell to the floor. "Mom, what did you do?" Andrew whispered, frozen at the doorway. "Not, are you okay, not what happened, just blame." Lying on the cold tile, surrounded by soup and shattered dishes, I felt something break deep inside me, something that would never quite heal again, but what neither of them knew in that moment was that I still had one last card to play, a card my late husband had left me, hidden away like a secret, one that would change everything, and this time, I wouldn't be the one left on the floor. My name is Mary Whitfield, I am 70 years old, and until a year ago, I believed family was the one thing you could always trust. When my husband Mark passed away from a sudden heart attack, I thought my life had simply ended alongside his. We had been married for 45 years, he was my home, my anchor, the quiet rhythm of my everyday. After the funeral, the house we'd built together felt too big, too silent, the ticking of the clock became unbearable. That's when Andrew called. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore," he said, his voice warm with concern. I wanted to believe him, I wanted to believe I still mattered, so, I sold the only house I'd ever known and moved across the state to live with Andrew and his wife, Crystal. Their home was beautiful, gleaming hardwood floors, white marble counters, everything in perfect order. Crystal greeted me with a practiced smile. "Welcome, Mary," she said, extending her hand instead of her arms. No hug, no mom, just my name as if I were a tenant, not family. I tried to fit in to help around the house. Every morning, I brewed fresh coffee, cooked breakfast, and left little notes wishing them a good day. Andrew barely looked up from his phone when he mumbled, "Thanks, Mom." Crystal would glide in later, her hair flawless, her robe expensive, and her tone sharp. "The eggs are too salty, the coffee is too watery, the kitchen smells like grease." Each comment chipped away at me, small cuts you can't see but feel every second. I smiled, nodded, and tried harder the next day. I thought if I kept giving, eventually they'd love me back, but love doesn't grow where respect has already died. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Andrew was in the living room watching a football game, his laughter echoing faintly down the hall. I was in the kitchen carefully chopping carrots for his favorite chicken soup, the same recipe I used to make when he was a boy with scraped knees and a smile that could light up my world. I wanted it to be perfect. Maybe, I thought a simple meal could bring back a trace of warmth between us. Then Crystal's voice sliced through the air. "What on earth are you making now?" She stormed into the kitchen, her heels clicking sharply against the tiles. "Stop for dinner," I said softly, still stirring the pot. "It's Andrew's favorite." She peered into the pot with disgust. "This looks like pig slop," she snapped. "How much salt did you dump in? Are you trying to poison us?" Her words hit harder than any slap. I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could finish, she grabbed the ladle and slammed it against my head. The searing pain made my vision blur. Hot broth spilled down my neck. "Who cooks like that, you useless woman?" she screamed. I stumbled backward, clutching the counter. From the living room, I could hear the television getting louder, Andrew turning the volume up again. He heard everything, he chose not to see. That was the moment something inside me died, not just the pain of betrayal, but the realization that my son had become a stranger. Crystal stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to apologize for what? Existing. I looked at her, then at the door where Andrew sat pretending nothing was happening, and I knew whatever was left of my dignity, I would have to save it myself. That night, Crystal gave Andrew an ultimatum. "It's her or me," she said, her voice steady and cruel. Andrew didn't even hesitate. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said the words that cracked my world open. "Mom, maybe it's better if you find another place. You need your independence." Independence, That's what he called it, throwing his mother out after she'd been hit and humiliated in her own kitchen. The next morning, he handed me $200 in cash. "Just until you get settled," he mumbled, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't say a word, there was nothing left to say. The taxi pulled up in front of their perfect white house. I loaded my 2 old suitcases and climbed in. As we drove away, I looked out the window, half expecting Andrew to run after me. He didn't. The only sound was the faint echo of the television playing inside. The motel I found was cheap with buzzing lights and carpets that smelled of mildew. $30 a night. I did the math in my head less than a week before I ran out of money. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, wondering how a lifetime of love and sacrifice could end in a room like this. Days passed, I stopped counting them. When the money was gone, the manager knocked on my door. "Time's up." "Ma'am, you need to leave." His tone was polite, practiced, indifferent. I packed what little I had and stepped out into the world with nowhere to go. I walked until my feet blistered, dragging my suitcase through crowded streets until I found a park. That night, I slept on a bench under the stars. It was cold and the ground was hard, but the thing that hurt most wasn't my body, it was knowing my son was sleeping warm just a few miles away. A homeless man shuffled toward me, holding a piece of bread. "Here, Grandma," he said softly, "you'll need this more than me." I took it with trembling hands and whispered, "Thank you." It was the first kindness I had felt in months, and it came from a stranger. On my 5th night sleeping in the park, I decided to go through my old suitcase one last time. Most of it was useless: faded clothes, old photos, things that no longer belonged to the life I had lost. But at the very bottom, tucked between 2 sweaters, I found an envelope. My name was written on it in familiar handwriting, Mark's handwriting. My heart stopped, hands trembling. I opened it. Inside was a letter and a stack of documents. The letter began simply, "My dearest Mary, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you." I felt tears sting my eyes. He had written it before his heart attack. His final words to me: "I always worried about what would happen to you if I were gone. That's why I made sure you would be taken care of. For the past 30 years, I invested in properties one by one in your name. If you ever need help, contact my lawyer, Robert Hayes. He has the original documents. Mary, you are stronger than you think. If life ever hurts you, promise me you'll stand tall and fight back." I looked at the attached papers through a blur of tears. There were property deeds, investment papers, bank statements, and one address I recognized immediately: Maplewood Apartments, Unit 301. That was Andrew and Crystal's building, the one they had thrown me out of. My breath caught in my throat. It was mine, it had been mine all along. A laugh broke through my tears, part joy, part disbelief. I had been sleeping on park benches while they lived rent-free in my property. I found a payphone nearby and called the number at the bottom of the letter. "Hey Associates, this is Robert speaking." I could barely form words. "This is Mary Whitfield, Mark Whitfield's wife." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said finally, his voice gentle, "we've been trying to reach you for months. Your husband left you everything. You need to come in immediately." For the first time in months, I stood tall. For the first time in months, I had somewhere to go. Robert Hayes sent a black car to pick me up from the park. When I arrived at his office, people stared, their eyes caught between pity and confusion. I looked like someone who didn't belong in a building made of glass and marble, but that was about to change. Robert was kind, professional, and surprisingly warm. He explained everything carefully, spreading the documents across his desk. "Your husband left you 13 properties, Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "several apartment buildings, some commercial spaces, plus investments and savings. In total, your estate is worth over $10 million. $10 million? I couldn't breathe. I had gone from searching trash bins to owning half the city. Robert continued, "One of those properties, Maplewood Apartments, is currently occupied by your son and daughter-in-law. They'd been paying a reduced rent your husband arranged years ago, only $400 a month. $400. They were living in comfort while I begged for bread." I felt something cold settle inside me, not rage, not joy, just clarity. "I want to make changes," I said quietly. Robert nodded. We can set up a management company in your name to keep things discreet. Call it West Burbridge Holdings, I said, and start by updating the rent on Maplewood Apartments to market value $2,500 a month. He looked at me carefully. Are you sure? Completely. That night, I checked into a downtown hotel 5 stars, paid with my own money. I filled the tub with steaming water and washed away weeks of dirt and shame. When I looked at my reflection afterward, I didn't see the same woman. I saw someone being reborn. In the following weeks, I transformed. A new haircut, soft brown instead of gray, clothes that fit, colors that gave me back my confidence. I learned how to read financial reports, how to manage investments. Every number, every signature felt like a step toward reclaiming myself. I wasn't the frightened old woman from the park anymore. I was the owner, and soon they would feel what it was like to lose everything they took for granted. Weeks passed and West Burbridge Holdings quietly reshaped everything my husband had left behind. Rental contracts were updated, maintenance improved, and most tenants adjusted without complaint, all except one apartment 3001. Robert called me one morning. Your son has been calling nonstop. He says the rent increase must be a mistake. It's not, I said calmly. Tell him the previous owner's special agreement ended when Mark passed away. He must pay the new rate or leave. Robert hesitated. He's asking to speak directly with the owner. Tell him I replied. The owner is unavailable. Days later, Robert gave me an update. Andrew's behind on rent already. They're living beyond their means. Credit cards maxed out. Personal loans. A financed car. The increase hit them hard. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, cold sense of justice. Crystal blamed Andrew for everything. Their fights became constant public. The building manager said neighbors heard shouting at all hours, accusations, slammed doors, broken glass. It was as if their perfect life had started to crack from the inside. 2 months later, Robert walked into my hotel lounge with a serious look. Andrew hasn't paid rent in 60 days, he said. We're within our rights to file for eviction. Do it, I said. My voice didn't shake. The process moved fast. Legal notices, court filings, paperwork signed under the name West Burbridge Holdings. Every step by the book. It wasn't revenge, it was law. When the court date arrived, Robert stood before the judge on my behalf. Andrew's lawyer argued for leniency, saying the increase had been too sudden, but the documents were clear, every letter, every notice legally correct. The ruling came quickly. Tenant must vacate the property within 10 days, the judge declared. Crystal exploded in fury, shouting about unfair treatment, about heartless landlords. Andrew just stood there, hollow, silent, eyes empty. From the back of the courtroom, where no one recognized me, I watched the scene unfold. It was over in minutes. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just whispered to myself, justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it's silent and final. A few days after the ruling, Robert called. Your son requested a meeting, he said. He insists he needs to speak with the building's owner in person. I stayed silent for a long moment. Tell him to come tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I finally said. He'll meet me here in your office. That night, I barely slept. I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing the words I might say. I didn't want to be cruel, but I needed to be strong. When Andrew arrived the next day, he looked nothing like the confident man who once ignored me in his living room. He had dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders slumped, and his clothes were wrinkled. He froze when he saw me sitting behind Robert's desk. Mom, he whispered, disbelief written all over his face. I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. Sit down, Andrew. He sat slowly, confusion clouding his features. I don't understand, he stammered. Why are you here? Why are you dressed like that? I looked him straight in the eyes. Because I am Westbridge Holdings, I said evenly. His mouth fell open. What? The building you live in, the one you're being evicted from? It's mine, it always was. He blinked as if I had struck him. Dad never said, your father left everything to me, I interrupted. He trusted I'd know what to do when the time came. Andrew covered his face with both hands. Oh my God, I kicked you out of your own building. I didn't answer. The silence was heavy enough. Finally, he whispered, Mom, I'm sorry I was weak. I let Crystal treat you horribly. I didn't stop her because it was easier to keep the peace than stand up for you. My eyes burned, but I didn't let the tears fall, and now I asked, "Do you feel sorry because of what you did or because you finally lost everything?" He looked up, ashamed. "Both," he admitted. "I don't even know who I am anymore." I stood smoothing the crease of my jacket. "You have 10 days to move out," I said quietly. "Use them to start figuring that out." Andrew left my office without another word. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the empty chair where my son had sat, wondering how love could turn into something so fragile. I didn't hate him, I pied him, but pity doesn't erase consequences. A week later, Robert informed me that Andrew had vacated the apartment a day early. He left the keys, paid what he could, and disappeared with 3 suitcases and a bowhead. Crystal had already gone. Rumor was she moved in with her parents after blaming him for everything. The perfect couple had crumbled faster than a sand castle in the tide. With apartment 300 ante, I decided to renovate it completely. New floors, new paint, a fresh start. When it was finished, I rented it to a young nurse and her 2 kids, a family that reminded me of the woman I once was: hard work, grateful, hopeful. Then I turned my own life. I left the hotel and moved into one of my smaller houses on the edge of the city, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage with a small garden. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I planted roses, brewed coffee in the morning sun, and began painting again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. On weekends, I volunteered at the local shelter, serving meals to people who had stories like mine. One day, a man approached me. It was the homeless stranger who'd given me bread in the park. "Grandma," he said with a grin, "you made it." I smiled. "Yes," I said softly, "I finally made it." 3 months passed before my phone rang one morning. It was Andrew. His voice was steadier now. "Mom, I'm working again, a small warehouse job. It's not much, but it's honest. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." I looked out at the roses blooming under the sunlight and replied, "I'm glad to hear that, Andrew. Keep trying. Maybe forgiveness would come someday, but for now, peace was enough." That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky golden rose. The house was quiet, the air soft. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. I opened my old leather journal and began to write. "I've learned that love without respect is just habit, that silence can wound deeper than words, and that sometimes the greatest act of revenge is rebuilding your life until peace replaces pain." I thought about Andrew. Somewhere he was starting over just as I had. Maybe one day we'd meet for coffee, not as a mother forgiving her son, but as 2 people who finally understood each other's scars. I closed the journal and looked at the garden. The roses swayed gently in the evening breeze, full of color, full of life. Mark would have loved this view. In my heart, I whispered, "I did it, love." I found myself again. The wind carried the words away, and I smiled. To anyone listening to my story, I want to say this: don't let the cruelty of others convince you that you are powerless. Even if life knocks you down, you can always stand back up. You can rebuild, you can reclaim your worth. And if this story touched you, share it, because somewhere out there, another forgotten mother might need to hear that it's never too late to rise again. This is my story, my revenge, my peace. My name is Mary Whitfield and I am finally